First of all, tell me, what sort of family were you born into? What sort of place did you grow up?
I was born in the place where the broken mirror and steps in darkness are placed. And that was the place where my father was working as a very petty official or clerk, you might say, in the revenue department, you know.
And the town was, what was the town?
The town was Dinga in district Gujarat. Actually, we didn't belong to that town, but he had a job there, and there was a village from where the family came. The village is called Dera Bakshiyan in Rawalpindi district. The reason I mention that is that there was a sort of the experience of partition was repeated in our case and in probably many other cases because Dera Bakshiyan was and the surrounding villages were affected much earlier in 46. And whatever part of the family lived in that ancestral village was driven out much earlier. I didn't experience that except from a distance. But I used to go to that village, once in a while during my childhood and boyhood.
And that's the village you mentioned very early in the book where I think your young brother
died. Yeah, that's the village which pops in and out of both the novels because I have very fond memories of that. It was a very neat village in my memory at least because it had stone paved streets. It was hilly village, and it didn't have the usual dust and dirt, which villages have. And whenever it rained there, it sort of the rain ran through the cobbled streets, and it looked like very clean, and so on. So, but most of my childhood and boyhood was spent in Gujarat district. There was another small town, very much smaller than Dinga, Mungowal, where I grew up. I was born in Dinga, then the family shifted to Mungowal, and I completed my primary education in Mungowal. And in Dinga, I was in high school, and then from Dinga I went on to college, first to Rawalpindi, then to Lahore.
The impression I get from your novel is that Dinga was it was a very mixed town, but it was quite divided. I mean, the instant of caste Hindus objecting when a Muslim is offering to go down a well to rescue a drowning girl. How divided was the town?
Well, this is usually like everything else about Hindus and Muslims. It was a very ambivalent relationship. In some ways, it wasn't divided at all. For instance, my next door neighbor, both in the novel and in real life, for many years, was a Muslim family. And the smell of their cooking used to enter our house, and they were naturally rigorously non-vegetarian. We were not vegetarian, but we cooked meat occasionally, and I used to sneak food out of them. So, this happened in many cases. On the one hand, there was segregation so far as eating and, I'll eat with you, I won't eat with you. I'll do business with you, but I won't eat with you. This was one-sided, as you know very well. This was one-sided segregation from the Hindu side. The Muslims did not mind eating with the Hindus at all. On the one hand, there was this kind of division. On the other hand, there was a lot of intermingling, and there was a lot of friendship. But when it came to that water situation, since the drinking water was taken from that well, they couldn't conceive the idea of this is all imagination though, I never witnessed any situation like that. But I know that there were women in that town who would go and take a bath if they accidentally brushed against a Muslim walking in the lane, older women. I mean, the lanes were sometimes very narrow, and you couldn't help brushing against that. So, those incidents, led me to imagine that in my mind, very powerful scene, very funny, very ludicrous, and very sad, where, when a Muslim who is capable of rescuing that girl offers that help, there is this whole... I use that incident to bring that thing up. just as I did in a train, if you remember the novel. Now I'm talking about the novel. Through the novel, I'm talking about that relationship. This is the funny part of it. On the one hand, there was this good neighborlyhood, during peaceful times. On the other hand, there was always this undercurrent of resentment on the part of the Muslims, very correct resentment in my childish imagination also. And I was always, sort of breaking those barriers in my own little way, as many others probably did, just disobeying your parents and going and eating with a Muslim. Eating in their house, sneaking food out of them. On the one hand there was this, on the other hand there was this affection for each other also, I mean, I don't know, the analogy it's not exactly a perfect analogy, but like some of the white-black relation in South of America, in southern states, Although the Hindus were not always in positions of power, they were money-lending Hindus. In this novel there is not much attention has been paid to The Broken Mirror as a partition novel, as a socio-logical novel, because I see it from, the boy's point of view. I don't give documentary background, I try to reflect the macrocosm in that microcosm, but it's very much in my mind, I mean, I know what I'm doing it consciously. Through those characters, the eating and mixing situation, the sexual attraction and the taboo that accompanies it, the economic relations, where the Hindu is the money lending, the powerful Hindu in that small town is a money lender, and they are hated, but because of the power of the money, when the riots took place, they were able to escape unhurt, unscathed, because they had contact with the zamindars, the Muslim zamindars, who were also well-to-do, but who always needed money because of their licentious habits and so on.
When did you personally, as a teenager, I imagine, when did you first realise that the trouble that preceded and accompanied partition wasn't simply another incident of communal unrest, but something much, much more serious?
Well, it's so hard to pin it down, but when I think of my own experience, I must have been a precocious boy in this particular respect, because the instances were always numerous. The school that I went to there were two schools there, and they were both private schools, and both owned, so to speak, and run by two individual families. One was a Hindu school, Rai Bahadur Sundar Das High School, and this man was, of course, a very well-known person. He was dead at that time. He had helped the British during the First World War, made a lot of money, and in the novel there is a beautiful palace there, which is mentioned. I don't know whether it's mentioned in this novel or Steps in Darkness all the time. There's the Sham Pyari, that fat woman who's notoriously promiscuous and who has a string of Muslim lovers, including that barber and so on. No, that was a fact, I mean, this was the legend about it. I don't know the fact, But there was this beautiful, huge palace called Sundar Mahal, Sundar Palace, which had its own electricity, and the two sons of that dead man, Rai Bahadur Sundar Das, after whom the school was named, owned their own private plane and so on and that kind of thing. And he had two wives, and one of them was this Ram Pyari, she was called, but I changed the name to Sham Pyari. And I had seen her and so on. There were instances of this. There was this school, there was the other school, Khalsa. It was not Khalsa, it was Sardar Hakim Singh, named again after another person. I was a student of that Sardar Hakim Singh High School. I was poor. And the fee, whatever little fee was, I was a good student and I didn't have to pay the fees. This was a rich boys' school, that was a poor boys' school, roughly speaking. although there was overlap. But both the schools had a mixed student population. Our school, the Sardar school, more than the other school because lots of village boys used to come, the surrounding villagers, the Muslim boys from the villages used to come. So I had friends among Muslims and Sikhs, and I used to be very curious about their food and their living habits and so on, and I used to be very critical of my parents' or other people's parents' attitude to being touched, and not touched and so on. We had Muslim teachers. Majority of the teachers were Muslims. There were some Sikhs. Our headmaster was a very powerfully effective person and very secular, So I don't know. I think I started having a rather different attitude, and I maintained that attitude throughout the riots, to which we'll come. That I didn't have any anger. I had confusion, but I didn't have anger and hatred against the Muslims, in spite of the fact that all of us could have been wiped out, which we weren't. We were saved by a family. It's a very similar situation as in Broken Mirror. We were saved by a Muslim who hid us in a haystack, for about 48 hours or so.
But before we get to that, when did you first hear people talking about Pakistan? And when you heard people talking about Pakistan, when it was still an aspiration, was that with a sense of menace or?
Well, a sense of confusion. I started hearing it in school. We used to have a morning assembly. It was a very good school in a way. That school provided me the basis of my two languages. Hindi I learned later, Urdu and English both. I never learned from any English teacher, but I think I was fairly well grounded before I went to college. Thanks to this headmaster who had never been abroad, but who was an excellent teacher, and Nashville grammar and he. And similarly, so there used to be, stop me when I start rambling, because there was a morning assembly, and one of the teachers, occasionally the headmaster, sometimes the second master, whom I nicknamed Ravan in this, he used to give us the headline. The whole entire school used to assemble after the drill and everything in the compound, and he used to read the headlines of the day and make snide comments on each headline. And the comments on Pakistan were always very snide, No one took it seriously. This started, let's say, about, I passed out from that school in 42. So it must have started in 40, 41, the peak of Pakistan. Before the Quit India movement, the Pakistan idea had already been mooted. And I remember very clearly that there used to be snickers of laughter whenever Pakistan was mentioned, and the idea was ridiculed because no one thought it was a practical thing. So he used to say, they are asking for Pakistan, tomorrow there will be this Stan, there will be Gaustan, there will be this Stan, and we used to laugh at it, So the idea got planted about Pakistan very early, in my mind, during the, let's say, as soon as somehow the Great World War and Pakistan were intermingled, and Hitler. And, there used to be great admiration for Hitler in the school and I was not really. I used to find it very funny that there was a sort of a hero worship of Hitler. Similarly, I used to find it very funny that some people, I don't know, I'm making it sound as if I was fully formed politically, but I wasn't, I was confused. But I was not a Muslim hater. Let me put it there.
Well,
and I'm not, no.
In the months leading up to partition, Pakistan was looking like a reality.
Yes.
What was the mood then? Were people regarding that, were Hindus regarding that as menacing?
Well, it started being menacing very, that's the, I was in Lahore, so I could experience the menace at Lahore. I was staying in a hostel. We used to have night watches. This is in 46, early 47. Then in 46 also I must have gone back to my town during summer, and in 47 of course I was there. Now those were days of great fear on the part of Hindus, and there was a stillness in the town which one could see, which I could see. There was this whisper hush attitude, and there were people leaving. The town had a bazaar, right, which waved through the whole town, and you could sit in any place and see people's baggage being carried on. No Tanga, Tanga, could go through that bazaar. It was too narrow. On donkeys and donkeys loads of going to the Tanga stand, and from there it used to be transported to the railway station. The town had a railway station of its own. So those were days of menace, as you say, and one didn't know what to do. For instance, we didn't know what to do. Our family didn't know what to do. We had nobody on this side of the border. We couldn't go back to that village, Dera Bakshiyan, which had already been destroyed, which had already been before partition. I mean, no Hindu was left there. Some were killed, but most were driven out. I mean, a few were killed, but most were driven out, in a very so-called civilized way. So we didn't have relatives on this side. So we just helplessly, it seems to me, and foolishly, we had no illusion that nothing would happen there, because the town, as I told you, or I should tell you, had a mixed population. The town itself had probably, I'm guessing, 60% Hindus and Sikhs and 40% Muslims, but the surrounding villages were predominantly Muslims, and the fear was that the town would be so-called besieged, as it was when the time came, and all the people from the surrounding villages would come and start looting and plundering. So in that town, what happened, I mean, during those 2 or 3 months, those who could escape started escaping. Their number was small. Some people probably just didn't really face the fact that terrible things might happen. Some people did face and started preparing for a sort of a fight, There was a fortification done. We were outside of that fortification. I was mentally as well as physically outside of it. I didn't want to participate in that. This is true.
What did your parents expect would happen? Were they expecting a bloodbath?
I think they were scared. My father, very gentle man, and had lots of Muslim friends because of his job also, because it was a sort of job involved touring in the surrounding villages. He had a little horse, and he used to go touring and so on. And so he knew many Muslims, but he knew that there would be a bloodbath. I think my parents knew that there would be bloodbath. I also knew that there would be a bloodbath, but we didn't know what to do. We had this assurance not from our neighbors, with whom our relations became strained during the last 1 month probably. They started giving us indication that something is going to happen, a friendly indication. They were involved actively in the killing, Even the gentleman who saved us, who was a carpenter, Ghulam Ali, who was a friend of the family, and his children were junior to me in the school, and I used to sort of tutor them occasionally, free. So he had promised us that he will save us, that he will hide us. So we knew that something is going to happen, because when he said that he'll save us, just about 10 days before, he had said that if once the word goes out that things are going to happen, they happened in a very organized way.
That's what I was going to ask you. I mean, it does sound terribly organized.
It did not happen in a sporadic way. That's where I disagree with my friend Bhisham's sort of emblematic opening of the novel Tamas, You read that. of course things like that must have happened also, but they don't explain the situation. I think that things were building up both on that side and on this side in a very organized way, and it was not that somebody killed a pig and threw the pig in the masjid and so on. That's not how a typical riot happened.
Who was organising it? I mean, this was Muslim League hardliners or simply local gundas?
No, it's not gundas. Unfortunately, it was not gundas. They were Muslim League hardliners. They were Mahavir Dal people who were organizing a defense, but their defense provoked the Muslims even more. I mean, they would have liked everybody to...
The crinkling is going to be picked up by the microphone of the...
Oh, yeah.
Sorry. Tell me about the people who were organising the defence. That was Mahavir Dal.
There was this Bajrang Wali or Mahavir Dal. There was no... I don't know whether there was an RSS Shakha there, Rashtriya Swayamsevak. I don't recall. I don't know. There might have been that also, but I think it was Mahavir Dal, Bajrang Wali or Mahavir Dal, named after Hanuman. And there was this Muslim League, of course, and there was the Khaksar party. I don't know what their role was, but I don't know whether you know that at that time there was this Allama Mashriqi Khaksar party, and there was the Sikh community who, correctly or incorrectly, they thought that they should prepare the defense, and they were collecting ammunition and the usual implements of riots, the daggers and all that. And I didn't see them with my own eyes, but I sensed them, from my friends and so on, who are mentioned here. There was this tension, and during that tension, all these things were happening silently. And Muslims were very resentful. They thought, how do I know? I don't know. I think that you could hear this conversation in the bazaar, in bunches, groups of people and so on, and they used to talk about it because there was nothing else that one could think about at that time, during that a month and a half before the riots. I don't know the exact date. I had a diary, I used to keep a diary in Urdu, not in English but Urdu, to keep it more private, it seems, because in my family only my father knew Urdu, and I don't know, Urdu would be more private or not, but I don't know, I kept it in Urdu. At that time I had ambition of writing in Urdu, which I did, for a couple of years after partition. That diary is totally lost. We couldn't save anything. Otherwise, I would have pinned down the dates and so on. Not that it matters.
But what month are we talking about? When was this after partition?
No, this month would be June or so. It was summer. It had to be June, and the partition was in 15th August. And we were in trains, I think, for a lot of that time. Refugee trains and so on.
So the riots happened in
the month of June.
In June 47.
June or July. I don't know. I don't know whether they happened exactly after the drawing of the line or just a little before.
And you, in your own mind, you believe that the Muslim League organised it?
In my own mind, I mean that the entire adult population, leaving aside a few, there was this Congress man, who's a character in the novel, Himmat Singh. His name was Hukumat Singh Lamba, and he was the Congress leader, local Congress. They were trying to organize peace committee. There's a whole scene of peace committee. Now, in that peace committee, everybody was involved outwardly. The Muslim League was also involved, but there was, as that peace committee says, now this is all imagination. There is no meeting that I ever attended, but one used to know that they used to have take out morning session, early Prabhat Pheri they called, early morning session, trying to preach peace and so on, and that was done outwardly. There were assurances, but during the riots, when the riots were taking place and we were hiding in that little hovel, and this our protector, who was bloody-eyed and waking and killing and so on. He used to peep in every now and then, every fourth or fifth hour, and he was giving us food and so on. And we were, my mother was eating that food. She had never eaten food, and I had no problem. But whenever he came, we knew that he was involved in killing. That his entire face was flushed and so on, and he didn't conceal the fact that he was involved in killing himself personally.
In the novel, he actually had raped somebody who took shelter with you. Is that true?
No, nothing like that happened. He didn't rape it. Yeah. He took her out. No, he didn't. No, that didn't happen. My sister was with me, and there was this other family, and there was this very rather beautiful woman, and she was afraid. Now, I think the implication is before she came to that hovel, my character's guess is that she was raped, not by this fellow, but by somebody. I'm not sure. No, but this fellow was involved. Similarly, there was a Hakim. You know a Hakim?
Traditional medicine.
Yeah, Unani Hakim, whom I used to go, and I remember, his voice. I was very clear about his voice. The place we were hiding was actually not the carpenter's place, but it was a place, abandoned place, and the next house was that Hakim's house. And I remember, very clearly that I could, throughout the night and the day, I could hear him somewhere perched on some rooftop, giving orders to the marauders, do this, go to that house, go to that, and sort of shouting orders throughout the night, and I could recognize his voice. Now, he was this is the madness part of it. I could never associate him with killing. He was such a saintly-looking man with a flowing beard and a panj namazi, and offered his prayers 5 times. A very good Hakim. I make fun of those Hakims in the novel, and there were some very funny Hakims. Used to see your pulse and diagnose every disease and so on, and it was all exaggerated. But he was a good fellow. He used to take care of minor problems and so on. But he was involved. That is the madness part of it. I don't know whether he was always involved or he got into the act.
What sort of things was he shouting?
Practical things. As I told you that some streets, you have to visualize the town to a certain extent, that there was this bazaar and the lanes emanated from that bazaar, and bazaar went through the sort of belly of the town, and the rest of the, suppose this is like a river, the bazaar flew, and the lanes here, and so there are some predominantly Hindus and Muslims lanes which somehow could be fortified at both ends, and the attack was, the organized attack, with firearms and so on, was concentrated on that particular section of the town. And it was sort of a military operation, amateur army operation.
Can I just interrupt you just for a second?
Yeah. It was like a military operation, that do this, go to that. You would name names, Mahesh Shah ke ghar po ek na bachne paye, ye na ho, udhar se jao, udhar se jao. There were several of them. He was not the only one. But I could recognize his voice, and I didn't know whether they were shouting through those, unelectric megaphones or what are they called, loudspeakers or speakers, or whether they were doing it without. But we kept on whispering to each other, "This is Hakeem Zuhur's box. This is Hakeem Zuhur," and feeling a little shocked that he was also involved in it.
How did the riot start? How did you know that there was going to be?
Oh yeah, I don't know. What happened was that I think a couple of days before, everybody knew that it could happen any day now. And the indication, somebody told us, I don't know whether our neighbors, but some Muslim fellow told us that maybe he sent a message, our protector Ghulam Ali, leave your place and come to that place. He had already told my father where he'll hide us, And I remember that when we were walking through, we had to walk through that ubiquitous bazaar, in order to reach that place. So everybody was closing the shops, The shops were mostly Hindus, There were only a few Muslim shops. At some point, probably we should talk about what did the Muslims do there in that town. What was their occupation? But we could see that the bazaars was being closed. Our family was not all together. For instance, I remember that my mother, father, myself, and my brother, we were there, but we had a sister and her daughter, about 7, 8 years old, or maybe more, 10. And she was missing, and so we were frantically searching for her, where she was. She was probably playing somewhere, or I don't know where she was. But finally we traced her. And so it was done in a great hurry, which means that the notice was really very short. It was toward the evening sometime. The darkness had not set in yet, but it was toward the evening, because very soon the night fell and the thing started. And the thing started because there were drum beats and so on. The thing there was as apprehended, there was an attack from the surrounding villages, but with the collusion of the local population, local Muslim population. So this is how it happened. So we had some plans. We'll take this, I think that we never took anything. I had made some satchel kind of thing of my diaries and some stupid stuff. We were never able to take that, So we just, the clothes that we were in, and some ramshackle, footwear, not the proper footwear, some chappal or something. And some of us were bare feet, I think that my brother and that girl, my brother was 10 years younger than I, and I was only 19, so they were same age, about 9. They were probably barefoot, or something. My mother was also barefoot when we reached that place, which was a distance of about a furlong or so. It's not a big town. It was very compact, but we went to that hiding place in full view of probably many people, and so throughout that experience, there was always a danger that some people, they were seeking out, toward them after they had taken care of the major problems, that is, broken that citadel, so to speak, and looted whatever they wanted to loot, and killed whom they ever wanted to kill, and spared some. They were searching out the hidden people and thronging the lane outside and suspecting that there are people. So we had very tense moments, throughout those 36 or 40 hours, I don't know how many.
What did you feel like when you were
in there? It was awful. We were numb. In terms of number, let me give you the exact number of people who were there. We were 4, 5, 6, 6 our family. My sister, her daughter, her husband wasn't there. My sister, her daughter, my parents, myself, and my brother. 6, and there are 2 more people. 3 more people. Another woman who was also protected by her, and her brother and brother's wife. No, it was an awful feeling, that we could hear the gunshots. We could guess from the shouting that people were being killed, that fire, several houses were on fire, wherever they could safely set the houses on fire, they did. Where there was no Muslim adjoining house. For instance, I think the house where we lived could not have been set on fire because it was a sort of a common wall with the next neighbor. And it was just, we were numb with terror. Personally, I don't know what to do, how to explain that. All sorts of thoughts did float through my mind, some of which I tried to reinvent, or reconstruct through Biru. But some ramblings, there must have been some snatches of even sleep and dream and nightmare kind of thing. And I remember that my father was quiet, but my mother was constantly mumbling something, prayers and stuff. There were plans, they would say every now and then, and everybody was tense and short-tempered also. This man, for instance, I remember very clearly that he wanted to smoke, and everybody wanted him to. My father also smoked, but he somehow suppressed his desire to smoke. The other fellow, the other adult male, he would light a bidi every now and then. And he was very curious as to what was happening. And he would go to the mouth of that howl, and try to look outside, partly out of curiosity, partly out of some vague idea that maybe we'll have to run and so on, and partly out of idiocy. I think he was scared, but his nervousness found expression in this thing, and so everybody would snap at him. Or they would make plans that if they do come in and start killing us, then I'll be the first. My mother would say I would be the first, and my sister would say I would be the first. That they were trying to save the little ones. That kind of thing. There was some jewelry. Every time this man came, Ghulam Ali, and he was, he kept his promise. He didn't exploit the situation, didn't take advantage of it by extracting money out of us and so on. I mean, I'm talking about not the novel, the real life. And every time he came, all the women, or at least some of them, they would start taking off their bangles and offering it to him, and he said, no, I don't want them. They thought, they take it. I mean, they would try to bribe him so that he would spare our lives,
Was there a fear of sexual violence?
I don't know. I think if I base my answer on the novel that I have imagined, I think there must have been. Because there were two young women there, and probably there must have been, and because they were raped. After the. Well, if you have any more questions on the specific situation, but after, so far as we were concerned, when the things somehow calmed down, I don't know how they did, but there was some army rescue. Toward the dawn of the following day or whatever. I don't know for sure how many hours we were spent. In my mind, it's more than 24 and less than 48, I mean, a full day and some hours. But it could have been even less, it could have been one night. But I think it's 2 nights and a part of the day. But when we were taken out of that hovel to a so-called makeshift refugee camp, which they set up not in a school compound as I make it in the novel, but in a Tehsil office compound. It was early in the morning. Very early in the morning, and we were taken to that place, and all the survivors were, of course, I imagine all the survivors were taken to that place, and it was not light enough. It must have been very early in the morning, around 3 o'clock or so. and we walked behind or along with a number of people, including our protector. And there were lots of injured people there, including many children. And somehow I remember that I was one of the volunteers trying to help some makeshift first aid that was being given by, there was a civil hospital in that town, and there must have been some compounders, not a doctor, but some, compounder. 2 or 3 people were trying to, give first aid to the wounded. And there were all sorts of wounded people. It was all done in the dark. It was a very horrible sight. And what did I start? I started saying something else.
I think you were talking about both sexual violence
and
the sites that you saw.
Yeah. Later on, in that place, we were there probably for a day. And everybody was comparing notes, and some people had been able to rescue some stuff, some household stuff and so on. There were piles of it, And there's some like us who were just absolutely without a thing. Without a thing. And the whispering about the killing, who got killed, the counting started, people were asking. I remember I was looking for my friends, school friends, and I found that one of them had been killed. I give him the same name in the novel, Hardyal. And he had been married, he was very young, but he was married early. He was married to the sister of another friend of ours, mutual friend. And she was raped, and she was pregnant. He had been married a year earlier. After his BA, he got married. And I was studying in MA, and she was pregnant. And she was raped. Now, I didn't see her in that camp, but a day later, we were all transported, those of us who had nowhere to go, probably, and most of us had nowhere to go. I don't know, some people might have made some arrangements with some Muslim friends and so on. After that, our protector didn't know what to do with us, And so we were transported to another town called Mandi Bahauddin. You might have heard of it. It was a market town. That's why it's called Mandi. And there we actually lived in a regular refugee camp, based in a school or a building. And there I saw that girl whom I knew as a schoolboy, and who was very beautiful, and we all used to have sort of puppy love for her, which I exaggerate here. But she was the sister of this friend of mine. And she was pregnant, and she was delirious because she had apparently pregnant and raped, and she had tried to jump from something. She had probably had a miscarriage already, or she was going through the miscarriage, I'm not sure. But I used to go and sit with her and her mother. She didn't have any father. And the brother, somehow, the mother had managed to send the brother away, because there were trains, and we were waiting for a train which would take all of us, the refugee train. So this was very horrible. I saw only one case of actual girl who was raped, and and I was very close to that family and so on. And so I used to go to the same building. I used to go and sit with her, and she was feverish and she was delirious. And later on I heard that she died. And she had this huge gaping wound in her forehead, which was being treated in a very bad way by some poor doctor who didn't have the didn't have anything. And she was dying, in other words. And nothing, I don't know what could have been done. But she used to talk deliriously, incoherent stuff. For days. It was so painful.
How long were you in the refugee camp?
Again, my imagination, I don't have dates, and I think we were there for about 3 to 4 weeks. not less than that. Because when we came finally to this side, it was September already. So maybe the fighting took place in July. I don't know. Maybe it took place in August. I mean, I'm not sure.
What was the refugee camp like? What was the mood then? I mean, people who...
That was very strange. The refugee camp was, we were getting some relief at that time, that we were being maintained by some volunteer organization. Maybe there's some government money also, I don't know. Some people had somehow managed to come away with all sorts of things. Some people had saved the jewelry, some people had cash, some people had stuff, some people were given stuff. So it was all a mixture, But the mood, was very strange. I mean, there were people in that camp. All the people who were saved were not in that place, obviously, because the town had... I mean, I don't know. There were all sorts of figures, that some said 2,000 were killed and some said I don't know how many were killed. But the killing could not have been total, But lots of people did survive. Most people did lose some members of the family,
Talking about hundreds of people?
Hundreds of people killed in that town, At least, more than 1,000. That's the guess, my guess. 1,500 was the figure that we kept on talking. The mood of that thing was sad and angry, and there was one man whom I didn't know before the camp, one man from that town, who was very proud of the fact that he had killed many Muslims, that he had fought bravely, and he used to talk about that. And I used to feel uneasy about even that, I remember that it was a building, maybe a school, it must have been a school, a double-storied building with again a compound, the usual. And he was a Mahavir Dal man. And he started organizing a sort of group, even in that camp, which would come this side and do the killing. He was very frighteningly cool. He was not abusive. He was very well built and strong. I don't know him very well, but he was sort of well fed, well spoken, soft spoken, sort of a RSS kind of figure, who takes exercise and so on, takes care of his body. And he used to gather people around him, men, and I also sat several times, and he used to talk about how many he was able to kill during while fighting against them, and that he was one of the organizers of the resistance, so to speak. And he had plans that he would come to this side, and he did. I mean, I think he must have done it. I mean, I lost touch with almost everybody. I don't know, partly deliberately. I met some people. I have some friends even now who survived with me. But soon after the part when we came first into Jalandhar and lived in another refugee camp for a month or two. Before I got a job.
You travelled by train?
Travelled by train. It was an awful memory of the train. Finally we got the train, and the train was again, it's not a great distance, as you know very well, but at that I had never come to this side of, I had never travelled beyond Lahore. On that side Rawalpindi and Peshawar, on this side Lahore, I had never, my family had never travelled this, we didn't have probably the means to do so. So we were afraid that the train, there were rumors that the trains that left that particular point where we were in Mandi Bahauddin somewhere stopped, and people were butchered, I don't know how true those rumors were, but we had this rumor hanging over our head that we will be butchered on the way. So the train was not stopped, but did stop because of their own traffic problems, or the train are all, the Indian trains, even in the best of times, are always stopping on some way. Did stop, and it was a horrible thing, that I don't know what happened to the rest of the family. I just went mad for a few moments, I'm sure. Because it stopped for several hours. We had nothing to eat. And some people who had something, they were making those makeshift fires and eating and so on. I don't know whether we had anything to eat or not. I don't know whether we probably brought something. But I was angry and so on. I remember that I really, whatever the shirt that I was wearing, I tore it off, in some fit of insanity.
The train was not attacked?
The train was not attacked. We finally made it to Amritsar first and then to Jalandhar. And at Jalandhar we had some vague notion that we knew some people, in which turned out to be correct, but we got off the train at Jalandhar. We didn't want to go all the way to Delhi, because Delhi, we didn't know, it was not planned. We just finally got tired of it and got off and went to a regular tented refugee camp and started living there. There I started volunteer work and started getting paid for that volunteer work and so on, and for about a month I think I was there. Then I got a job in that town through somebody's help in a paper. Ironically, the paper was it was called Hindu. And it's an old paper. It was in Urdu. It was in Lahore. I knew that family. We related to that family. Which is a Hindu Mahasabha paper. And I was on the editorial staff, mostly translating from English to Urdu, news and so on and whatever.
Bisham Sami has written this short story, Amritsar Aa Gaya.
Amritsar Aa Gaya, yes. He's a good friend of mine.
I've talked to Bisham as well, actually, about this.
Yeah.
When you arrived in Amritsar, did you feel safe?
Yeah, yes. I mean, as I recall, yes. When we got off the train, before I got off the train, I was insane for I don't know for how long. I mean, it's sort of a desperate, we didn't know what to do. But when we got into that camp, yes, it was, the instinct for survival is there, the life instinct is there, so we were laughing and so on. And I remember that, I made friends among some volunteers, one of whom later on was my student, in Jalandhar. My first teaching was in Jalandhar later on, after I had completed my MA. So, Jalandhar was safe, yes.
And were you glad to be in India?
I think so. But sad to be away from our home, and that transportation is still there, that I'm glad to be in India, even now, but I haven't felt rooted here mentally. Which doesn't mean that I'm yearning to go back, and but I somehow have this notion, not the Hindu fundamentalist notion, not the BJP notion. No, I don't subscribe to the BJP politics, never could. But I do have a notion that the business is unfinished, that the two-nation theory somehow was a wrong theory. We should have another definition of nation so far as a country like India is concerned. It was not a fight among two nations, it was a fight among two religious groups, not even two ethnic groups, because the ethnically, there is a lot of common. And my feeling is that I still wish, that if they can't be reunited, they should at least have a totally open border like Canada and USA. And they should forget the past. Now, they can't forget the past because the same problems are being repeated here now, and the BJP has its own solution, which I don't subscribe to. But I don't agree with the other solution either, which is you have the Muslim vote bank and you have all that nonsense, But they can't be anything of that ideal nature unless things change in Pakistan also.
Partition was obviously a tragedy.
Partition was a tragedy which might have been avoided, How? Well, one simple, it's a hindsight thing now, that if they had just stuck it out, not been eager to get independence, at the cost of partition, at the cost of the unity of the country, rather. Jinnah would have died. No, we didn't know that he was dying. Not that everyone, you probably know this. It's a ridiculous, regret, but it's there. That he was, even if he was not suffering from cancer, I mean, they could have deferred the decision, as some people, as Gandhi wanted to, as some other people wanted to. I think Jawaharlal was too eager, and he was seduced by Mountbatten. I mean, I don't mean it literally. It could be, I think it was that eagerness accompanied by personal kind of affection that developed between these two people. And they did Mountbatten. And some other people who were eager, for power and so on, or who thought that this was unavoidable, partition was unavoidable. I think it might have, some other formula might have worked, There would have been some partition of power, The Muslims had to be given, the Muslim League rather, had to be given something. But this was not a well thought out solution. Had it been, they would have probably thought of the unfinished business, as you say. Unfinished business is that we still have the same Hindu-Muslim problem in this goddamn country, don't we? Pardon my cursing. We do have that problem still, And that problem would not disappear by plastering it over by secularism and so on, the problem had to be tackled in a real manner. There should be, I don't know, I mean, I have radical solutions. There should be total intermingling of marriages, etc., 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 not just one isolated or two isolated. They should break those barriers. The Hindus should be the first to do that. They should start at least, treating the Muslims. As you can see, that I am implying that the fault lies more with the Hindus. But in actual killing, the Muslims did as badly. They were as beastly as the Hindus, those who were involved in actual killing, and their number runs into thousands or more. It's not just individual cases of gundas. No. In these riots, yes, Bombay riots, gundas must have been involved. But the partition riots were not just gundas. No. There I disagree with Visham, that they were just some handful of leaders and gundas. No, I think that the rot or the poison or the hostility had seeped down to the common people on both sides. Of course, there's a simplistic answer to that, as you know, that it was all economic. Now, I think the economic factor is very important, but it was not all economic either, It was not that the Hindus were exploited. That's one very important factor. The Hindus were hated because they were the money owner and money lending classes. But that was one. The Hindus were hated and the Muslims were hated. I think the problem has never been tackled. Of course, the other simplistic solution, the British, blame the British. I think they ought to be blamed, but that was not, again, that was another important factor. I mean, the British did fan the thing over the years, but still our leaders should have been smarter.
Can I ask you a
Yes.
question?
Just come.
Is your tape coming up?
Coming to an end, yeah.
Can you remember what your mother did while you were in that hiding, and what your mother did on that train journey, and what your mother did when she reached Jalandhar, or she saw that? Not yours, but her. Can you remember what she did?
She was very unhappy, and she was basically illiterate. She didn't know what was going on. She was illiterate. She knew only a few words of Gurmukhi, Punjabi Gurmukhi, and the only book that she ever read was Gita in Gurmukhi. But she didn't know on the level of politics. She didn't know. She must have been among millions who did not know what Pakistan was when it was happening, and later on she must have, of course, gathered in that it's a separate country has come into being. So what she did was in that place she was mumbling prayers for safety and for so on, crying or being nervous and so on. And on the train again, same thing. The train was constantly misery. Then in that, just keeping alive and worrying, you know, what will happen, what will the future be, what will be the future. And when we rehabilitated ourselves like many others did, you know, I mean, my father started working, he had retired, but he started a job, same job, somewhere in Balabgarh. I started that job, then I came to school, I raised a loan. So we were trying to keep the family, and she was worrying, and she was constantly, of course, worrying and remembering things, you know.